We were talking about 1827 before I was rudely interrupted by the time limit. So, what they were doing is sending women and children to work instead of the men because it was cheaper, and that led to a destruction of family life. Men were upset because they were no longer looked at as the providers of the home, and women and children were overworked and therefore not super happy as well. Family life that existed for England for hundreds of years was disrupted, and they rarely spent time together as a result. So now on your map, I want you to add one jail, since so many men turned to crime, two pubs, since with their free time they would just go drink and get drunk, and two tenements because the lower wages resulted in people being able to afford fewer houses and having to be moved into tenements or apartments. So now we're at 1838. So let's look at the working conditions in the factories. It's nice to think of the factories as lovely places that increased production and therefore increased the amount of money people had, but the conditions made life a little bit hard. The two predominant factories are textile, which were clothing items, and iron or steel. Working conditions in either of these two were appalling. Many workers were in contact with deadly diseases and contracted factory fever or white lung disease. It was probably a variety of lung ailments like cancer, tuberculosis, and emphysema. This was as a result of breathing in the different toxic fumes put out by the factory machines, as well as low immune systems from overworking. Other workers were injured on the job or in factory accidents since they were working with large machines. Children, weakened from lack of proper sleep or diet or rest, stumbled into machinery and were mutilated or chopped up to death. That's not a pleasant sight. Regardless, if you're unable to work, you were fired, and therefore you weren't able to contribute to society. So I had two hospitals for all of the injured workers and one more cemetery for all the workers who were killed. Now let's look at 1840. There's need for quicker transportation. There are a lot of people who are working in the cities and working in the factories and need a way to get to work. Coal, iron, and finished products, as well as raw materials, must all be transported from one area of England to another. In Ireland, in the late 1830s, a devastating potato famine drove hundreds of thousands of Irish to England. It was kind of a refugee situation similar to the Syrian one that we're seeing in modern times. The Irish weren't able to grow enough food to feed their people, and therefore they migrated to areas where they thought they'd have an opportunity to work and feed their families. This also resulted in the factories being able to hire cheaper labor because these people were starving and willing to accept less money. Therefore, they used this cheap labor to build more railroads that helped them transport the materials throughout England. As a result, add one more railroad line passing from east to west through your town, and add 5 more houses, which bring our total to 75, and one tenement for the new railroad workers. Now we're going 2 years into the future. It's 1842, and there are some advantages to urban dwellers, or people living in the city. City life is very different from country life. And as you know from starting as a rural town, your country has kind of turned into a more industrialized city. For the small but growing middle classes, a whole new cultural life is available. For this middle class who used to just spend all of their time working with no extra money, now they have extra money since they're beginning to own factories. As a result of that extra money, they're able to develop and visit museums, theater, opera, restaurants, plays, and concerts. Before, only aristocrats could afford the arts, but now the growing middle class enjoys the fine life of culture and good living. As a result, on your map, add one theater, where plays will be shown and entertainment will take place, and one museum. Also add 2 private schools for only the upper class students. Mark these schools with the letter P for private, and one nice house for the people working in all of these new entertainment and luxury businesses. Now we're at 1845. There are no pollution controls, so the air in your community looks dark. What was once a nice small town with a river and a bunch of trees everywhere is now turned into a polluted area full of soot and coke. Windows, walls, and trees are all covered. The river that once flowed through your quiet village for hundreds of years and provided for your citizens are now unfit for drinking, bathing, or even to do laundry. Your city is overcrowded and shrouded in factory smoke. Add one more cemetery to take care of all the new dead people, one jail, and one hospital to accommodate the victims of urban life. So now we're at 1850, and we're coming to the conclusion of our simulation. The Industrial Revolution has certainly transformed England by 1850, and you could see that through your small town. Your small town has become a large city as a result of industrial advancements, a growing middle class, and immigration. By this year, several million acres of good English land has been enclosed and sold to private parties who now own large estates. Despite the misery this creates for England's landless poor, the economy benefits for the rich, and those benefits are obvious. They now own luxury items. They now can send their kids to private schools. Students, they now can afford entertainment, but it's not great for everybody. These new farmers purchase the new power-driven machinery and can now feed the working class of England. Thousands of these folk leave their villages, where their ancestors had lived for hundreds of years, and move to towns and cities looking for work to feed their families. That new influx of people lead to new demand for food, which leads to new money, which leads to new jobs for more people, and it's a continuous cycle. As our final aspect of the Industrial Revolution simulation, add 20 more houses, which now bring our total to 95, 5 more tenements, 2 more stores, 1 church, 5 more factories, 1 pub, and 2 more nice houses and a special house, all to accommodate for the new increased amount of people coming to your city. And this simulation now concludes and demonstrates to you how rural areas of Europe, specifically in this case England, transformed as a result of all of these new innovations. Now look at your map. Think about what it looked like just the beginning of last class, when it was nothing but a river, a couple of houses, and some trees. This is a really good glaring example of the growth that the Industrial Revolution provoked throughout England.